All right, so I heard Scott Adams wondering aloud the other day where Hitler got his propaganda from, not the content, but like the technique and strategy, which is a great question and one that I have an answer to. He got it from this book right here from 1923 titled Crystallizing Public Opinion, written by Edward Bernays, the nephew of Sigmund Freud, the uncle of co-founder of Netflix, Mark Randolph, and one of the most prolific American propagandists of the 20th century. Edward Bernays was. And it's not me saying that Bernays, or Hitler, excuse me, I get the two confused. It's not me saying that Hitler used this book as the basis for his World War II Nazi propaganda. It's Edward Bernays himself who makes this claim. And he makes it in his 1965 autobiography called Biography of an Idea, which I do not have a hard copy of that book because, as you can see here on Amazon, it's almost $400. I do, however, have the Kindle version of it, and I am going to show you what exactly Bernays said in that book, which is in chapter 55 in the Karl von Weigand section. You'll have to excuse my German pronunciations here. In that section of the book, which you can see on screen here, Bernays recounts an interaction that he had with Weigand after Weigand returned from Germany in 1933 during Hitler's rise to power. Bernays says in the passage, Karl von Weigand, foreign correspondent of the Hearst newspapers, an old hand at interpreting Europe and just returned from Germany, was telling us about Goebbels and his propaganda plans to consolidate Nazi power. Goebbels had shown Weigand his propaganda library, the best Weigand had ever seen. Goebbels, said Weigand, was using my book, Crystallizing Public Opinion, as a basis for his destructive campaign against the Jews of Germany. This shocked me. But I knew any human activity can be used for social purposes or misused for antisocial ones. Obviously, the attack on the Jews of Germany was no emotional outburst of the Nazis, but a deliberate, planned attack. One more time. Goebbels, said Weigand, was using my book, Crystallizing Public Opinion, as a basis for his destructive campaign against the Jews of Germany. Now, Bernays says he's shocked by that, as we just read. But then he contradicts that in the very next sentence when he acknowledges that he knows any human activity can be misused for ill purposes, he implies. Plus, anyone who has ever read any of Bernays' books or watched any of his interviews knows that shocked is not something that Edward Bernays ever really claimed to be, especially when it comes to propaganda, because he was one of the foremost experts in the world on the subject, and he aggressively marketed this book internationally, in Germany, with the help of Freud. So it would be odd for him to be surprised when it was picked up and used by German propagandists working with Hitler. This book is much better and more practically useful for propagandizing people than his book Propaganda is. I mean, there's a lot of interesting stuff in here. You can see it reflected. Like, if you've read this book, this is a very believable claim. Not to mention that Bernays, if you know anything about him, if you studied him at all or listened to him at all or read anything about him, you know what he's doing in this passage. He's boasting. He's boasting about Goebbels using his book, Hitler using his book. Why else would you make that admission that Hitler was using your book and your strategies and tactics as a basis for his Nazi propaganda campaign against the Jews of Germany, especially when you're a Jew, like Edward Bernays was? Hope that helps.